Hey, what's up you guys? Welcome to Books My Quiet Friends. My name's Sydney, and welcome to my July wrap-up. So this month I kind of had a slow reading month. I only read 6 books instead of my normal 8 or so, and that includes audiobooks. So without further ado, here are the physical books I read this month. The first book I read this month was A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I really enjoyed this book the first time I read it before I read the second book, but after reading this again, I still enjoyed it, but I enjoyed finding the details that she had put in so the second book would work out the way it did. I'm trying not to spoil anything for you guys here if you haven't read this series. This series is extremely problematic, I won't lie to you. There's a lot of things about control and abusive relationships. There's just a lot of things that are not very well represented in this book. And I know there's a lot of people who hate this book for that reason, but I still enjoy it as a read overall. I still give it 5 out of 5, not to say that it doesn't have problems, it definitely does, but I think for a fictional piece of work and a fantasy book, I still enjoy it. So personally, I still really enjoy this book, and I can't wait to continue to reread the series before getting to Aquawar, which I haven't read yet. I'm ashamed. The next thing I chose to pick up was a graphic novel, and that was Saga Volume 3. There's a bookmark in it where my boyfriend's reading it. He's almost done, yay! But yeah, I really have enjoyed this series so far. I think this one was the most hard-hitting out of them all. The violence is a little teeny tiny turned down from the past ones, and I think that this series is doing such an interesting job in talking about race and equality issues and people finding love where there is love and all that stuff, while maintaining a really interesting world and a fantasy element. So I can't wait to see where this goes, and I hope to pick up the rest of the series soon. The next book I picked up was The Diabolic by S.J. Kincaid. This book took me about 2 weeks to get through. It was a bit of a tough read. I gave this book 3.75 out of 5 stars. Yeah, that's right, because I felt like it didn't fit in 3.5 and it didn't fit in 4. So, I'm allowed to rate things what I want to rate things. Tell me what you rated this book if you read it down below. I'll get defensive. Huh. So this book follows our main character who is a diabolic, so someone who was genetically manufactured to take care of another person. During this story, they find out the best way to protect Sidonia is to send Nemesis in her place when she's called to a court-like gathering in space. So that's kind of the premise of this book. I think that this book really started to catch on like halfway through. I started to get really into it. That being said, there's a lot of explaining, and I found it very difficult to get into this world. There's a lot of people that you don't understand and a lot of planets, and you kind of have to figure out like the political part of this book and how that all stands together and who you can trust and who you can't trust. Which I liked those aspects, but at the same time there was a lot of over-explaining and things that had to be explained to you because there were so many different terms that you wouldn't come across in other literature. I think I will continue this series if I'm still interested in it when the next book comes out, which I think is September. The last physical book that I read this month was It Wasn't Always Like This by Joy Preble. This is a fairly short book that I picked out of the TBR jar, which I was excited about, but it touches on a lot of important topics. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It's kind of unlike anything else I've ever read except for Tuck Everlasting, just as there is a forever element to it. And I think that it was interesting the way the author chose to portray the main character over a long period of time. That being said, I think that it was a little rushed in this short book, and I would have liked a little more, and I hope to read more from the author because I really enjoyed her writing style overall. Now on to the audiobooks. I can't remember if I included this in last month's wrap-up, so I'm doing it again. Sorry if this is redundant. I finished Highly Illogical Behavior by John Corey Whaley. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It really portrays an interesting fact about mental illness, about how instead of fixing someone, you can cope along someone and see what their life is like and try and make their life, I don't know, better, but not fixed. Because people don't need to be fixed, they need help. I also really thought that this book did an excellent job of showing that there's not always a cure and there's not always a better. There's just a way of coping with your mental illness day by day. The other audiobook I got to this month was Tarnished by Catherine Longshore, and this is a story of Anne Boleyn during her time as one of the Boleyn girls with Henry VIII. Now, there are a lot of things that I didn't know in history, but I do remember Henry VIII, and I do remember the amount of wives he had, and the struggle, and that stuff. I don't know a lot of detail about it, but at the same time, I do know enough that this story was kind of heart-wrenching, knowing what was going to happen to Anne Boleyn in the long run. I also think that the author did an interesting job in showing the characters and how women were treated during this time, and how Anne Boleyn kind of arose to fame in the court by being different and being able to speak her mind. Although women's rights still were not a thing for many, many years, and in some areas still aren't, it's interesting to see a main character in this time period being able to be who she really was, although it was frightening for her. I do not think I will continue any of the books in the series. I can't remember. I think they're called like the Royal Jewels, maybe, series? Does that sound right? I didn't read the first one, and I don't really plan to read any more of the wives. I'm kind of over it. I'll leave it where it was. It was just a 3 out of 5 star for me. It was good, but not enough to keep me hanging on there. I'm thinking at the end of these videos, I'm going to start talking about what I'm currently reading. So I'm currently reading Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. This book is blowing me out of the water. I'm 187 pages in, and I plan on finishing it today, I hope, and then ordering the rest of the series as soon as I can. I can't wait to see where this goes, although many say that the ending is disappointing. Don't spoil it, just hush, hush. And I will keep you guys updated in my next video about what I'm reading next. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will see you guys next weekend. Bye!